I never imagined a single call would destroy my life. Fuck this job. I never thought I'd say that, to curse the career I'd loved for the past 12 years, but here I am ready to kiss it all goodbye. I'm not going to show up to work today, not after what happened last night. It was 1:45 when I got the call. A domestic disturbance on the 1500 block. It was a slow night. I'd been sitting in my cruiser for most of it, so having something to do was relieving. The call didn't seem too urgent. A neighbor reported hearing a woman screaming down the hall of her apartment building. Most of the time, these calls never amount to anything, usually turning out to be a mother reprimanding her unruly children, or a husband getting an earful from his angry wife. God knows I know what that is like. I didn't even turn on my sirens when I pulled out into the road. I pulled up to the apartment complex and reported my status to dispatch. The radio sputtered, and the woman on the other end confirmed my arrival. The static of her voice echoed through the night. There were a few curious eyes looking through the windows, nosy neighbors ready to see why a police cruiser was in the parking lot. I tried ignoring them, but even after all these years, it always unsettled me to be the messenger of malice, like the retreating dark clouds after a torrential downpour. I walked down the hall and the blinds closed as the bad omen strutted past the glass. I tried not to take it to heart, but it gets to you sometimes. I reached the stairs and made my way up to the 3rd floor. The hall was dark. A few pothole lights illuminated the passageway. They buzzed overhead with an electric hum, ready to burn out at any second. Although no one was watching me through the windows on this floor, I still felt like someone was there. There was a primal uneasiness that was making the hairs on my neck stand on end. Walking forward, the clinking of my shoes on the concrete, an ungraceful presence and an eerie calmness, I found myself fighting not to put a hand over my holstered pistol. I couldn't be the trigger-happy cop, the rotten eggs you see in the news, but I still had my fist clenched by my side. I'm a grown man, but I'm still wary of the monsters that lurk in the dark. Only after all these years, I've learned that people are the root of all evil. The father who abuses his children, the murderer who kills out of spite, the old lady with a murderous twinkle in her eyes. She was watching me through a crack in the door, her undulating eyes screaming bloody murder. It startled the hell out of me when I saw her. I hadn't even heard the door creak open. She whispered to me, beckoning me over with her gnarled arthritic finger. My stomach was in knots. Something told me not to get closer. There was a vitriol disgust in my mouth, like looking at the necrotic flesh of a dying animal. Maybe it was her balding, unkempt hair, or the toothless, gritted mouth, but she didn't seem too friendly. But I had an obligation to step forward to help anyone in need, and by the state of her gaunt face, this woman needed my help. Her voice was shaky, a mix of fear and malnutrition. What the hell took you so long? I was confused by her question. Fear was slowing my mind. But when I looked at the number on the door, I made the connection. This was the address that had placed the 911 call. I composed myself and asked her the details of the situation, but she shushed me, telling me to keep quiet. She looked down the hall, making sure that no one had heard us. She nearly closed the door in my face when one of the lights overhead flickered. Her eyes pleaded for me to come closer. I hesitated, but obliged. It's down the hall. It's watching us. I felt my chest flutter at the ominous tone in her voice. A horrendous screech made its way down the corridor and almost knocked me on my ass. The old woman slammed the door, and I finally had my hand on my gun. On the far end of the hall, crouched at an intersecting passage, a woman, naked and bare, trembling like a stray dog. My left hand reached for my flashlight, but I had a hard time turning it on, instinct telling me not to look at the sickly figure caressing its knees. But I flipped the switch, the hall glowing a bright white as the woman was suddenly in the spotlight. She looked like she was crying, rocking back and forth, hair draped over her face, yet there was no whimpering. I called out, asking her if everything was okay, as if I already didn't know. She looked famished, skin and bones, her ribs visible through her chest. I took a step, her body shuddered as my foot struck the ground. I assured her that everything was okay. I'm not sure who I was trying to comfort, her or myself. I reached for my radio, pinned to my chest, and requested EMS, but dispatch didn't respond. No one was there, and the woman had stopped shivering. For some reason, I felt like I just stepped on a pressure-sensitive landmine. And the moment I moved, I was done for. I tried swallowing the lump in my throat, but my mouth was dry. The air was stale, toxic, and I didn't know why. The woman's chest was pulsating, panting. I shifted on my foot, not taking a step, but just enough to disturb the fuse on the bottom of my soul. The woman lifted her head, and I caught a glimpse of what her hair was masking. Her mouth was stitched shut. Globulates of blood dribbled off her chin. I couldn't see her eyes still hidden behind her bangs, but the way the crimson tears streamed down her face, I knew they were also sewed. The woman perched herself on the floor, and I found my pistol already in my hand. I stepped back, off the mine, and the woman ran at me. I dropped the flashlight and opened fire, the muzzle blast giving me still images of the woman barreling towards me. I know I struck her a few times. I saw the bullets cutting through her flesh, but she kept on coming. My finger was automatically pressing the trigger, and before long I'd emptied my clip. The last still image I saw was on the ground, and the woman was standing over me. I'd struck a few lights in the exchange, and now my dropped flashlight was the only thing piercing the darkness. I scrambled for the flashlight and turned it to the woman, but she was gone. I heard the door slam shut, and I violently panned to the source of the sound. I managed to catch the woman's foot disappearing behind a door, the same door that belonged to the old woman. I frantically reached for the extra clip on my belt, reloaded my weapon, and tried radioing for backup. I was relieved when someone actually answered this time. Shots fired, I said. Almost instantly I heard the sirens howling in the distance, But that wasn't the only thing that howled. From the other side of the door, the old woman was pleading for help. Her muted screams filled me with a contradicting resolve. Help was on the way, I shouted through the door. The woman screamed as her voice gargled with the sound of death. I knew she was dying. I knew she wouldn't make it until backup arrived. I nearly pulled out my hair as I wrestled with my conscience. Unconsciously, I was already kicking the door down. I'm dying, the woman screamed. The door started to buckle as I heard the squelch of her flesh getting torn apart. Help me, please, I'm dying. The door finally let go. The room instantly went quiet. Police, come on out. I tried to sound authoritative, but my voice was quivering. I panned the light as I walked into the living room and found the old woman standing in a corner, her back toward me. Show me your hands, I commanded. The woman didn't move. I cautiously made my way to her and nuzzled my gun into her shoulder. Still, she didn't move. There was a lamp on the other side of the room that shattered on the ground, and I frantically looked in that direction. Behind the couch, a person's hands gripped the fabric. I knew who it was. Hands! Show me your fucking hands! The woman let go of her hold on the couch, her spine unfurling like a serpent readying itself to strike. The stitches that once kept her mouth shut were now ripped apart and hanging off her face, though her eyes remained closed. She opened her mouth, showing me her teeth. They were filed down to a point, all of them. She hissed, and I raised a shaky gun toward her face. Get on the ground, I yelled. That was when a pair of teeth sunk into my neck. It was the old woman. She had latched onto my skin, her once gummy mouth now riddled with jagged fangs. The woman from the hall just stood there, listening to me fight to get the hag off my neck. I bashed her head with the butt of my flashlight, thunked her with my fist, pulling out clumps of hair with my hands, but nothing loosened her jaw. I heard the swashing of my blood as she sucked it into her mouth. My legs were starting to go limp, my vision hazy, and I was losing consciousness. The world started distancing itself. I was drifting away, dying. My body growing cold, my heartbeats becoming hollow. I dropped the flashlight. That was the last time I saw the light. My eyes no longer worked, but I saw everything, heard everything. The spiders weaving their cobwebs in the corner, their mouths smacking as they shaped their masterpieces. I felt the earth turning underneath me, the cold midnight air, the heat of the day cresting the horizon somewhere in the east. I felt the building growing old, the wooden boards in the walls slowly rotting, withering away. That was when I saw them. All of them. The apartment complex should have been teeming with life, the units filled with a rhythmic flurry of heartbeats. But the only thing I heard was the growling of their stomachs as they pressed an ear to the walls, as the old woman fed on my body, as my blood drained into her mouth. My heart pumped for the last time, and I no longer felt physical pain, but dread started coursing through my veins when a car's brakes squealed into the parking lot. Help had arrived. The two women retreated into the hall, leaving me on the floor. It wasn't long until a radio sputtered from down the hall and an officer walked into the room. Moments ago, he would have been my saving grace, but now I was his demise. His arteries pulsated in his neck. I wanted to sink my teeth into his skin, to refill the void the old woman had left behind, but I couldn't. I knew this man. He was a friend. I couldn't do to him what had been done to me. Suddenly, the building was empty. While I was listening to the thudding of my buddy's heart in his chest, the things in the building had managed to scurry away. They were gone. Dozens of officers arrived and taped off the area. They sat me in the back of an ambulance where they tried to take my vitals. I refused, telling them I was okay. They took my service pistol, a standard precaution after an officer discharged his gun. I know I will be on desk duty for a while, as they investigate me for discharging my gun, but I'm not sure if I could sit in a room filled with a dozen beating hearts. I came home last night to find my worried wife waiting for me at the door. Someone from work had given her a call and told her that I was shaken up but okay. I smelled the anguish in her blood. It gave her copper-scented flesh a tinge of saltiness. She hugged me and tried to kiss me, but I pulled away. I would have sunk my teeth on her lips if she had. I sat on the couch all night, fighting not to tear my wife's neck open, but the longer I fought, the worse my stomach growled. A taste wouldn't hurt. I stood over her trying to restrain myself, but found myself tracing my tongue on her skin. She playfully pushed me away, caressing the back of my head. I lost control. The next thing I knew, she was lying lifelessly underneath me. I waited for her to wake up, just as I did, but for some reason, she didn't. She was gone. I'd killed her. My body was momentarily replenished, but at what cost? I was already growing hungry again, and the love of my life was gone. This was supposed to be my suicide note, but when I put a bullet in my mouth, it didn't work. I want to die. I don't want to live like this. To be this thing, this monstrosity. Someone is going to come looking for me when I don't show up for work tonight. I don't want to hurt anyone else, but as time drones on, I'm conflicted. Now, I'm not sure if I want them to stay away, or if I want someone to come asking questions. I don't think I can restrain myself if they do. I'm not sure I want to restrain myself.